Welcome to the Coffee First podcast, inspiring stories and conversations from around the globe on faith, culture, and everything in between. I'm your host, Rebecca Machelli. Let's dive in. Along the way, we come across stories of people living with disabilities or parents who are raising children with disabilities. Today, this reality hits home as I host a very special guest, someone I have had the opportunity to know personally for well over 2 decades, right from our childhood. Dorothy Kisarale has spent the last 6 years of her life navigating the challenges and the joys of raising her son, Harvey, who's living with cerebral palsy. From the initial diagnosis a few days after Harvey's birth to the ongoing journey of becoming an advocate for children living with special needs, she shares her insights into her daily realities of parenting a child with special needs and the unwavering love that has sustained her and inspired her to help others.
My journey started 4th January 2019. It was a Friday. I vividly recall this because I was very excited. Can showed all was well. My first child is a girl, so I was so excited that I was having a boy. And the name, I had already prepared all that. The name was Harvey. At about 3 p.m. Ugandan time, I gave birth to Harvey, and it was what they term as a normal delivery. Baby was fine, I was fine. And so they nearly actually discharged us that same evening, but I insisted that we spend the night. The following morning, there's that first polio vaccination that every child is mandated to receive. So when I went to take Harvey to receive it, the nurse that administered that vaccine told me, I see some jaundice signs. At that point, his eyes were just slightly yellow. But I didn't take it seriously at the time because my first child had jaundice, except that hers manifested on day 3 post-birth. I exited the hospital anyway. She said, just make sure you sunbathe him, endeavor to exclusively breastfeed him. He needs it. I said, oh, okay. That I always do. I did with my first. I certainly will do with my second. We left the hospital and headed home to my mother's home so that she could nurse me at least for a week. The weekend was okay, went through the weekend very well. That was Saturday. Sunday, he cried quite a bit, and I thought, as a new mother, I think this one is a crier. I didn't think much of it past that. Monday morning, there was a nurse that would come to help me clean up my newborn and the cord. So when she finished washing him up, she told me, Dorothy, I don't know if baby Harvey is fine, but perhaps try to latch him and we see. And so I put him to nurse to breastfeed, but he did not swallow like he did on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And so I realized something wasn't right. I asked his father to come and pick us up from my mother's home to see if we could take him to hospital and see what was wrong. We first passed by a clinic. I didn't think it was serious. We're lucky we found a good pediatrician who honestly had no time to even explain what was happening to our child, but just called an ambulance. We had her make a call to the reception to inquire whether there was an ambulance and if it had oxygen or not. At that point, it hadn't even sunk in that it was a serious situation until I got into the ambulance and asked me, between IHK and Nsambia Hospital, where should we take the child because he needs emergency medical attention? The doctor recommended Nsambia Hospital, so we rushed to Nsambia Hospital. Upon arrival is when now I ask what's going on. We noticed they took him to an emergency room. Several doctors came to see this 3-day-old. I didn't understand at the moment what was happening or why very many doctors were coming to look at my child. I think there must have been about 6 or 7 doctors surrounding my child, trying to put several lines to run several medicines. And so I asked one of them, what is happening to my baby? It's at that point that they sent me out and told me, you know what? If you're the mother, please close the door. First, let us work. We're trying to resuscitate your baby. I realized, wait a minute, you're using big words. Resuscitate? Is he dying? Actually, they told me, Google canicterus. The word in itself, when you're not a medic, sounds very big, right? So I go to Google, and Dr. Google, in quotes, has all sorts of things. So when I typed the word canicterus into Google, I saw all sorts of scary stories. Chances of survival after a child goes through canicterus is 5 out of 100. The percentages were really small and it was scary. So it's at that point that I now broke down as a mother and realized, okay, my child has gotten a brain damage 3 days post birth. What did I do wrong? Where did I go wrong? What could I have changed? Is there anything I could have done? Was it my fault as a mother, or was it the medical personnel's fault? And so that's how the journey started with Harvey.
That is something very heavy for any mother to carry around. How did you deal with the emotional roller coaster that came with this new discovery about your son's condition? Or, in other words, how did you cope with this new reality?
With all honesty, at the start, I think for up to about a year, I always kept putting the blame on myself. I always took it upon myself to say, perhaps at the minute the nurse said there was jaundice, I kept thinking I should have stayed behind. I should have stayed to inquire more because it was a 1 day old child. Why did I not inquire more? Or if only that nurse knew that jaundice that manifests in a child before they make 24 hours is very dangerous jaundice. But it's unfortunate that very many people, including medical persons, have no idea that jaundice that manifests in a baby that has not made 24 hours is very dangerous jaundice. I went home as a naive mother and I've carried that blame for about a year. Choosing for me to come to terms with it took a lot of counseling from my mother. From what go for her, she kept saying, let us parent Harvey the best way we can. It's only us that are going to make others love and accept him. It slowly started growing on me and I said, yeah, let me love my son. Let me give him the best of me for whatever time God has given him to me. Then the reading, the more I read, the more I researched and found small anecdotes online about experiences of other mothers or parents raising their children with cerebral palsy, the more energetic I got, so to speak. As we approached the second year, I now got in touch with my spiritual self, gave my life to Christ. Everything now from then on took a different turn. I started to see life with a new lens. About the same time that I also started to write, I said, it's so hard for me to find positive stories of parenting children with his condition. How about I start to document my own experience so that someday I could publish this information somewhere for another mother who is starting to walk the journey, because it's a journey no one plans for.
You mentioned that your mother was a huge source of encouragement and counsel during this time. I do know that within the very fabric of our African society and African culture, the stigma around not just cerebral palsy, but different neurological disorders is still very prevalent. Did you face any kind of stigma, any kind of castigation, or any negative interactions when it came to family or colleagues or loved ones?
That was quite inevitable either way. Being that it's an African traditional society, the African traditional society has a lot of traditions and cultures. And so I definitely expected those. Earlier on in the journey, I put up a wall around me and my son. So it was very hard for anybody to break through that wall. I would automatically be offended the minute anyone asked, oh, how is the new baby? Is he sitting now? Is he talking? What is he doing in terms of milestones? As years went by, me accepting and reading online, like I told you, learning and learning, I realized, let me become his advocate. Let me teach people what it is like that I go through. That was one. Two, when COVID came, 2020, that's when I started my group of mothers raising children with cerebral palsy. I started a WhatsApp group, and the WhatsApp group grew faster than I thought. Mothers kept posting their different situations of how they were struggling. I mean, it was COVID, all of us were struggling, but I have been blessed with friends. And so I thought, how about I use my WhatsApp and social media to collect something small from these mothers, and I go visit them. I got a letter that permitted me to visit, and I started collecting things. People would send money, and so I would buy things and go and visit. The shock that I got, people were staying in very bad situations, in slums. Someone tells you, we sleep down on the floor, and they have a child like who is worse than my own. And another will tell you, we last had a meal 3 days ago, but their child with CP is living on black tea with no sugar. And that's the only meal they've taken in 2, 3 days. And so I appreciated life more. I said, God, I'm sorry for the times when I have come off ungrateful. After that experience, it made me even love my child more. It made me now start to document my advocacy strategies because it's worse out there. That's how I developed the passion.
As someone who has personally experienced the financial burden of CP and also seen the conditions of other people or, other families that are living with children with CP, can you speak into the financial burden that it has on the ordinary Ugandan? Do you think that the ordinary Ugandan is able to foot the financial burden that comes with having a child with CP?
The financial burden that comes with children with CP is obscene in Uganda. Let's start from the drugs, the medication. Because our children with cerebral palsy are susceptible to seizures, we usually all of them are usually on anti-seizure medication. And these are not cheap drugs. I think the cheapest of these medicines for me in my case has been a drug called baclofen. It's a muscle relaxant, which I think was around 1,500 Ugandan shillings a tablet. So, and I'm saying that is the cheapest. There are syrups. I remember a time when we were on a drug called Tegretol, and a bottle of 30 milliliters was going for about 150.
I'm sorry, did you mean 150,000 Uganda shillings?
Yes, in about 4 to 5 days. So it meant that every 5 days I had to have 150,000. But that is the bare minimum. That is just the drugs. I have not brought in the aspect of therapies. When you miss physiotherapy for a child with cerebral palsy, they totally become disabled. They are disabled, but they cripple. Let me use the word cripple. When you don't flex the muscle every day, the muscles wear out. Now the whole body has muscles, meaning you're supposed to flex the entire body and work there finger by finger, then the palm, then the hand, then the every joint. And a therapist is supposed to do this about 2 to 3 times a day. Now, each session of a physiotherapist goes for about 300,000. A session lasts 45 minutes. A day would cost 900,000. But how many parents can afford that? Then I'll talk about the devices. Recently, someone was shocked when I told them my son has outgrown his wheelchair. I need a new one. And they said, "Oh, I thought it just wears out, maybe breaks, not that he outgrows and needs a new one." I said, "For every time he grows in height and weight, I need a new wheelchair, or he needs a new wheelchair. Otherwise, when you compromise that because of maybe financial constraints, again you're damaging his body further." So because as parents you're always trying to mitigate other consequences of what could happen, no one wants to get to the worst. A wheelchair costs a good CP wheelchair, because there are CP wheelchairs and then there are normal wheelchairs. A good CP wheelchair costs about 1.5 to 2 million Ugandan shillings.
That's for
Yes,
the one for children,
for the
not the one for
CP
adults.
wheelchair. Or up to even 3 or 4, 5. Depends on the quality. And remember, this cost you have to incur as when and how he grows. If he's growing very well and growing tall and fat, putting on weight, you have to incur that cost every 2 years, maybe, or every 1 year for some, or even 8 months for others who are lucky, in quotes. Because, I mean, if you're changing the wheelchair, if you're having to change the wheelchair, then the child is growing very well.
Dorothy, from what you've just said, I'm trying to wrap my head around how a parent who is living in rural Uganda, somewhere in a village, is able to be presented with these costs and then go back and look into their child's eyes and have a glimpse of hope for their future. And I just want you to speak into how you believe the government can step in to be able to mitigate this situation. How can the government provide some form of either be it advancements or some sort of subsidization so that children and individuals who are living with different kinds of developmental disabilities can be able to receive the help that they require and that they need?
The situation in Uganda is unfortunately dire state. Unlike our counterparts, the Kenyans, I don't know about Tanzania, but for us, the infrastructure state right from pediatric neurologists. Up until recently, Uganda only had three pediatric neurologists. One was stationed in Bogolobi called Dr. Biarugaba. The other is called Dr. Idro, who is the government researcher and is always busy and in and out of the country doing government work because he's the government registered neurologist and researcher. And the third, who recently joined the three, called Dr. Robert Sebunya, who is based in Zambia Hospital. So to tell you it's dire, to see those three professionals, you must come down to the cheapest, the most affordable of all of them. I think costs about 50,000 for consultation. But how many parents can afford it? Not many. Number two, they are based in Kampala. Are there no special needs children up country? Outside Kampala, there are very many. Ideally, I would recommend that government emphasizes or equips or puts scholarships to support the education of or advancement of more ped neurologists, because neurological conditions in children are increasing and there are very many. There's autism, there's ADHD, there's Down syndrome. There's so many neurological conditions that are cropping up every day. Up until recently, I was saddened to know that most of the children, we have a children remand home in Kampiringisa and the children remand home in Naguru. One of those days when I was completing my book, I wanted to actually understand what it is that I had heard, that about 60% of the children in those remand homes are children with autism. They are actually sick. They are not there because of bad behavior and things like that, but they are sick. Are they on medication? Why are they in a remand home? Because we live in a country or society that knows nothing about autism and what autism is like. And how will a child with autism and ADHD behave? Why is that? Because we have very few pediatric neurologists in the country. To parents, my recommendation would be read. Always be on the lookout. Technology has advanced in the US, in all those European countries. Even our neighbors, Kenya, technology has advanced. If as a parent you sit back and relax and get into, you're still in the self-pity mode, be on the lookout for technology on how you can assist them. The advancement in medication. In Uganda, we're still using drugs like phenobarbital. In the developed world, some drugs have been abandoned, but we're still using them. These are very dangerous drugs that corrode our children's livers, kidneys. But if as a parent you're not reading, learning, relearning, and unlearning, you're not going to ever know that I am administering my child with a dangerous drug. For me, those would be my recommendations to both parents and to the government.
Thank you, Dorothy. Now, you have a daughter, Harvey's big sister, named Heather. I want to hear from you. What is the relationship like between the two of them?
When Harvey was 2, Heather was 4 because she's 2 years older than Harvey. And there was a time she retreated, and she was retreating towards my mother because I definitely did not have her time. I was emotionally not available because I also emotionally and physically needed help. I could not accommodate her. And it took a friend of mine who is in Heather's situation, unfortunately. She has grown up with a young brother who is autistic, severely autistic. And she called out to me and told me, Dorothy, up to recently is when I started to love and appreciate what my parents went through, but I'll never forgive the fact that they did not give me attention the way they did for my brother. I missed it. I needed it. There are things I went through or had to go through, and I needed them to be in my corner, but they were never in my corner, but rather in my brother's corner. That message went deep into my head. I remember I went home and made it intentional. I wrote it down and said, I must involve Heather in each and everything that I do. I must tell Heather why we care for Harvey the way we do, and I have to break down that information to her age at that time. And guess what? It turned out very beautiful. Heather, at 7 years, is now the biggest child advocate for children with disabilities. Heather understands Harvey's condition much more than very many adults do. I love that I've involved her and that I involved her at an early age. When I started going around to visit other homes, I used to carry Heather along. And so she started to appreciate Harvey. And she started to appreciate the fact that there were others that are worse than Harvey. She's part of the journey. And yeah, it's beautiful.
That is just so beautiful to hear. Now, before I go any further, allow me to say congratulations on receiving your author hat. You are the author of the book Heart of a Warrior, which will be launched very, very soon. And I know that this is a project that is very dear to you, that you would like to share it with the world, and you would like people to be a part of what it is that you are doing and that you want to do, giving back to the community. Talking about Heart of a Warrior, the book, what was the inspiration and how far back did you start working on the book?
I have documented right from 2019 when I started walking my journey with Harvey. I remember at that point I canvassed the internet, I canvassed several libraries for a book. I was longing for a book or something, anything from a mother's perspective on how best and positively I could raise my Harvey. And guess what? There was none. Everything I came across were just small anecdotes, half a page, 1 page. It was not comprehensive. It was not giving me what I wanted or what I was looking for at that time. And yet, that time is the hardest time. I started to document my own journey with the hope that someday I would share it with the world. I've shared my regrets, where I am with what I know now. Maybe I should not have done certain things, and all that information is in that book.
Just go ahead and share when and where the launch is happening, and for anyone who would like to be a part of it, how they can support or partner with the cause.
Saturday, 9th November at Maria's Place in Naguru. And the book is going for 100,000. 100,000 entitles the person to the launch. There's lots of learning at the launch. There's lots of surprises at the launch. I've made sure that it's comprehensive because I do not want somebody to walk away the same way that they came. It's a learning curve at the launch, and I encourage each and everybody to be there. After the launch, the book will be available at Mahiri and Aristoc for now as we work on the translation, because I also want to have it translated into Luganda mainly because most of the mothers that I have worked with have really digressed into illiterates. Every book purchased is making a contribution to a daycare center that I am setting up as well. In Uganda, we don't have a daycare center for special needs children. When you take a special needs child to a daycare center, they'll either be mismanaged or mishandled, or they'll not get the appropriate care that they should get. And so I'm opening one in January. It's also going to be one that gives individualized education plans for our children. And so every book purchased, the purchase is going towards that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dorothy, and thank you for your unwavering commitment to being a great mother to Harvey, as well as your positivity in continuing to share your story to instill hope and be a light to those with loved ones and children living with neurological disorders and disabilities. If you would like to get in touch with Dorothy, you can find her contact information in the description box below. And also, if you would like to be a part of the Heart of a Warrior launch, you will find the details in the box below as well. You can also get in touch with her to be a part of a great cause and to bring about positive change in our community. That's it for this episode. Catch you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of Coffee First. I want to hear from you. If anything stood out for you from this episode, go ahead and leave a comment, like the video, and if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can also keep up with all the episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts.